Hi, everyone. Hi. A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Jennifer from UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute, a unit within the Singapore Management University. Now, together with our partner, the Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center from Sasin School of Management, thank you so much for taking time off to join us in this last of a four-part series of the SMU Sasin Sustainability Webinar Series for Asian Family Businesses. Our wish today is for you to walk away with a greater appreciation on how sustainability can make an impact on your core business, and most important of all, get inspired and get started. All right, so before we start today's session, please note the following. We are recording today's webinar, and here are some information which we would like to inform you. Okay, this is a quick view of the program lineup for today. The topic for today's fireside chat centers around how did sustainability make an impact on the core business, following which will be a time of Q&A where you can use the Q&A function to pose your questions for the panelists, and after which we will end today's session. Right, so without further ado, I would now like to invite the panelists for today's fireside chat. Moderating today's session will be Mr. Alex Mavro from Sasin Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center and Dr. Jack Hong from SMU. And joining us in this fireside chat are Professor Kenneth Goh, Academic Director of Business Families Institute from SMU, as well as Mr. Chirarop Pojanavarathan, Managing Director of SC Grant. And without further ado, I'll now hand the time over to Mr. Mavro and Dr. Hong. Over to you. Thank you.
Alex, we can't hear you.
Hi, Alex. We cannot hear you.
Whoa.
Oh, no, we can do. We do now. Thanks.
I'm not muted.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Oh, you can. Okay.
Yes. No,
yeah, thank you. Okay, once again, good afternoon. And thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm so pleased to see that there's a wide variety of voices out there who are interested in this particular aspect of family business. I'd like to introduce our school very briefly, the Sasin School of Management here, and our particular center, which is the Sustainability and Entrepreneurship Center, which is, we think of as the core or the mountaintop of good business in the coming centuries. We now have a motto for our school that just we set up about 3 years ago, which is Inspire, Connect, Transform for better, smarter, sustainable world. And that's the way we try to inspire our own students, because we want them to be not only good business people, but to have a social conscience and to demonstrate it in the way they conduct their business as well. So with that, I'll pass on to, before we go on to our speakers, I'll pass on to Dr. Jack Hong.
Thank you, Alex. So, am I muted? Sorry. Okay, I'm not.
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jack here. Right. I'm adjunct faculty of SMU. So today I'm representing UOB Asian Enterprise, SMU Asian Enterprise Institute to be a moderator for this session. Right. So USAEI has it's an institute that's founded to benefit local SMEs and institutes in terms of their learning journey, in terms of their the applied research, and as well as we form student teams to do consulting projects in order to bring their capabilities one notch higher, right? So this is what we do over at USAEI. Then for myself, I mainly do a lot of AI stuff, AI, artificial intelligence projects, and a big part of the demand today comes from sustainability projects like electric vehicles, for example. So there is definitely a lot of interest and a lot of applications within this space when it comes to sustainability, right? that's all I have. So now I pass on to Professor Kenneth. Introduce yourself. Yeah.
Oh, hello. Thanks to Sasin and the UOB AI Center for the invitation. Delighted to be here today. I guess I'm wearing two hats. The first hat is as a professor of strategic management at SMU, and one of the things that I oversee is the entrepreneurship program. And our focus in entrepreneurship is really to enable students to help them in scaling up the impact that they are creating, right? So very, very focused on impact. And within that program, one of the things that I teach is the sustainable entrepreneurship course. So impact is pretty central to what we do over here at SMU. The other hat that I wear is as the is as the academic director. I was going to say business director. Sometimes we get the two mixed up. But as the academic director of the Business Families Unit. And what we do at BFI, and if you don't mind, maybe I'll just share a quick slide, just two slides here. What we do at BFI is really about helping business families on their journey of creating sustainable impact. And the reason why we are doing that is because we see business families as deeply embedded within the community. And so they have a tremendous, tremendous impact for change, positive change and social impact. And we hope that by working with business families, making them strong, both on the commercial side, as well as on the families aspect of things, we can help them in creating sustainable impact and then making a contribution through SMU. So we run a bunch of programs, we do workshops, we work closely with business families. And so some of the programs that we run will be a next-gen family entrepreneurship program. So, I'm happy to talk more about what we do here, but, we see the family and the business as deeply entwined. And that's why when we are, for the courses that we cover in terms of entrepreneurship or wealth management, there's always an element of the family dynamics to that. So that's my role, as a professor at SMU, as well as the academic director of the Business Families Institute. Everything is centered around, well, it's centered around business families, but it's propelled and motivated by this desire to create impact within our communities.
Thank you. Excellent. Jirat, would you like to say a few words?
Yep, sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's such an honor because Sasin University is quite well known in Thailand. And thank you to SMU and all the well-known organizations that arranged this kind of webinar. And yeah, thank you, Professor Kenneth, Mr. Alec, Dr. Jack. So my name is Jirat. You guys can call me Wat. My nickname is Wat. So if it's easier, please feel free to call me Wat. So I'm the third generation of my family business. We transform textile waste and agricultural waste into more valuable items such as apparel and home textile. And yeah, I just in charge for my family business for a couple of years with my brother. So we try to be an inspiration for fashion industry and textile industry that we all can make different together for our shared future. So I hope what I share today can inspire you to adapt like sustainability concept to your industry or your organization. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. I might kick off the questions with something that's been on my mind ever since I saw you were joining us, Jirat. And that is what triggered your companies? I know your company's been around for some time. It's a long time family company. But what triggered the company's interest in turning to sustainable strategies?
Okay. Go back like 3 years ago, I think in 2019, around the late of 2018, when I and my brother decided to in charge about the family business. we saw a lot of environmental issue happening around the world, like flooding, wildfire, and if we go back like 2 years ago, there is the pandemic regarding like COVID-19, right? And Mr. Bill Gates, he post in their web blog or website that COVID-19 is awful, but climate change could be worse, because he said that the rate of people dying might be 5 times higher. So I think a lot of issue happening around the world. SC Grant has like some strength and value in turning like textile waste, agricultural waste into more valuable items and can be inspired in fashion industry. So that's the reason that I and my brother decided to do something serious about it. Yeah. And act as the sustainable textile from Thailand. SC Grant can be part of like share solution for our share future, part of solution, something like that regarding like in fashion industry.
And did you have any specific strategies or techniques in mind when you began, or how did you select what to do, how to get started and what to do next?
I think the most important for each organization, we have to revise your core value and your strength, because our strength is always about textile recycling. My grandfather and my grandmother, they're doing about trading textile waste, and second generation, they opened a spinning mill by transform those kind of waste into the yarn, like raw material, and sell like B2B. And then after we revise our strength, we see something that we can be part of solution. So yeah, that where I start.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Jack, did you have any questions you'd like to ask at this point?
Yeah, sure. So I would say that, so do you have any other, some of these say significant sustainability practices, right, that have really changed the way that you do things traditionally and the way that you conduct the business now?
Okay. We make it more practical. For example, the jacket that I'm wearing, okay, the customer can come to our shop and see, touch the fabric and buy from our shop as well. We make it quite practical and affordable for all the small fashion brands in Thailand. They can buy with no minimum. They can buy since like 1 kg or 1 yard of the fabric. So we make the recycled raw material become recycled fabric, and everyone can try and have it in their brand. So I think that's the key point that we do. We make it like affordable and practical, like entry for everyone. Because sometimes if we talk about like recycled fabric from the textile waste or agricultural waste, sometimes it's a bit hard to imagine that how to wear it, how to decide by using those fabric. But we create the picture for the customer in the supply chain.
Right. So does this impact your margins in any way?
I think regarding to business, it has many choice and many ways to do the business. Our roadmap to become like sustainable textile, top choice, and recycle hub in Southeast Asia. So we have around like five major revenue that we do at the moment. One is like we open our sustainable fashion brand, so everyone can like try our apparel. And one is like we have sustainable fabric. Customer can shop the fabric like fashion brand or the garment factory. And also we have some like OEM service. We call it like project post loop. A lot of garment factory in Thailand, but we quite different. For example, every company might have to change the polo or t-shirt every year. But when they order from us, they can bring their old uniform, and then we recycling back into new one for them. And we also act as the strategic partner and supply chain partner, because sometimes you sell the apparel in Europe, and then when you make the apparel, you have the cutting waste in your facility. We can be strategic partner to turn those kind of waste into new fabric for you guys. So yeah, there is various way of doing the business and making the revenue at the moment. Some might be high margin, some might be low margin. It depends, because we transform our production line into like customization. Yeah.
Right. So do you agree if I would say that, going after sustainability practices, you can actually increase the revenue channels that you can have as part of the business?
It's possible because a lot of company they consider about like SDG goals, sustainable development goals.
Yeah.
And we do the LCA. It stands for like life cycle assessment, life cycle analysis. We do it with the Canadian Environmental Organization. That this is quite well known. They do for the sustainable fashion brand. So after we do with them, we got the number, and we can show to the customer as a QR code in the apparel or the fabric that, okay, you have like decreased some production process, so you less consume natural resource, you less consume water consumption, you less release CO2. So that's the reason that a lot of customer they come and working with us.
That's interesting.
Could I throw in a question here? I'd like to ask Professor Kenneth, having heard Kun Jirarot, having heard you can't talk.
Yeah.
There you are. Now I got you. Yeah, you heard Kun Jirarot's explanation of the way they got started in the business. Although it sounds like the core business was built for sustainability in the first place. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, could you comment based on your experience on how his company's experience measures up to others that you've seen?
Yeah. So there are many different starting points. This is one of them. I think what we see here is the fact that for Kun Jirarot's company, right, the sustainability was kind of in its DNA already. And you may not see it in the traditional practices or the traditional business from before, but it's something that was embedded in the DNA. And so when the next generation comes about and they're more familiar with new technologies, different markets, different opportunities, more willing to break out and establish new relationships and look at new products. My sense was that the family, the previous generation might have been more supportive of their efforts in doing so. And it also helps that both brothers want to do it together. So, if you're looking at the power dynamics within the family, there's what we call a coalition of willing participants to enact the change. In other family businesses, you might see a different dynamic, right? So if you look at the other side of the continuum, you'll see families that might be more traditional and more focused on short-term profit making, and for good reason, right? We're not here to vilify any style of doing business or choices that certain people have made or previous generations have made. All these decisions we assume have been made for good reason. But some of the next gen members might face stronger resistance in wanting to move down this path of sustainability. In that case, you'll see different dynamics emerge. Sometimes they may take longer for them to engage in some of these practices. In some cases, you might see the next gen members spinning off and starting new businesses on their own. And that's not necessarily a bad thing as well. What we've seen in some cases is that the spin-offs had to happen not because the parent and child don't get along, but it could just because of how the business, the kinds of risk that the traditional business can take, right? And the positioning of the new business as well, right? So for some cases that we've seen, the new business entity just requires a different business model altogether, a lot more capital intensive. It's maybe run on a subscription model, right? So different revenue generating model compared to the previous business model. And for that reason, it just doesn't make sense for both entities to be lumped in together. It's better to have a spin-off, let it run on its own. The family can still be involved as partners or stakeholders. And the good thing is that you're also mitigating some of your risk, and you can allow the new entity, the new spin-off, to access another pool of investors.
Excellent. Yeah, that's what we're seeing here in Thailand for sure. A lot of entrepreneurial activities on the part of family members in related, industries, and it's quite inspiring to see. Actually, I'm happy to see it. Did you have a question, Dr. Jack?
Yeah. Okay. So when we look at some of these, this is very interesting when you mentioned about the, how some of these should be spin-offs from the parent businesses while maintaining that kind of the hook. I mean, that kind of link. We do see the similar thing happening in the tech industry as well, where we look at very, very high risk projects in which, any changes itself that carries a high risk, we want to kind of like decouple it away from, the parent business. Right, so it's like business as usual for the parent, and then after that you do some prototyping and experimentation for the smaller ones. So so what are some of these, or other relating to these sustainability practices? So what are some of these more common sustainability practices, right? Do you see family businesses in Asia focusing on in more recent years?
Is there a question for me?
Yeah, it's a question for you. Yeah.
So I wouldn't call it a common sustainability practice as much as I would, because of the diversity of family firms and the diversity of family dynamics. Right. It's more a case of what are some of the options. So we're not really looking at what's most common and everyone try to jump in and follow that model. Right. In the family business space, what we want is to understand the range of options so that we can find the one that's best suited for us. And so, in terms at the level of practice and how we structure and how exactly we get things done, right? You want to look at a variety, right? So get exposed to differences. Like I said, there's just one option. There could be many. But if you wanted to abstract one level higher, right, then it's about what are the common mindsets, right, that will enable families to observe and appreciate the variety of options, right, rather than just fixate on one to say this is the way we're going to do it and it's my way or the highway, right? So what is that mindset? And that mindset is something which we talk about in this book that I had just published, and I'm not here to sell the book, by the way. I don't get anything from the book, but it's something I'm happy to share. There's I mean, you can buy the book if it's still available, but there's a download link for it as well. And it's something I wrote with Philip Markovici and Iraj Isapahani, both of them, with experience in family business. Philip is a lawyer. And Iraj is, I think, 7th or 8th generation a family member, right? And the book is about the application of circular economy principles into the family business, into the family governance, right? So not just at the business aspect, right? And you see that in Kunjararat's business model itself, but in the way that we think about issues of succession, for example, the way we think about issues of family dynamics, right? Can we bring in some of those principles of circularity? And what that means is that you are not thinking of either or mindset, right? Rather, an either or mindset is, you have this new idea, you either do it in the family or you don't. If it doesn't get approved by the family, then you're out. But a both and mindset, right? Adopting a both and mindset that allows you to still be in the family, even if you want to do something on the outside, right? So that's in terms of so I wouldn't say it's a common practice, but what's some of the common mindsets that families should adopt in order to see the range and variety of options for them to practice sustainability? And I'll be happy to share the link to the book in the chat later on as well.
If you could put it in the chat, that would be helpful. Yes, thank you very much. You talk about the strength of the family. There's also, of course, outside influences, and one of the listeners has written in the chat a question. Have you seen that? Sustainable enterprise makes a lot of sense. but what are the facilitations that the businesses in general provide and or the government support beyond just the textiles industry? So what are some other helpful influences? And I'd like to ask Kunchira Rot to, take a first shot at it, and then also you, of course, Professor Kenneth.
Yep. I think regarding like government support, we also like get some funds from the government in Thailand as well, because you know that in Thailand we grow a lot of agricultural, so we partner with some agricultural factory organization, and then we get some fund to do like some biotechnology. It's not only in textile industry. It can be like in other industry as well, because in the angle of the circular economy, waste from other industry can become resource in other industry. So what we do here will impact a lot of people. I think that's the reason that I can get the fund from the government, and it's a lot of impact investment around the world. I believe if you have some proof and you can do it, there will be someone for you.
Yeah, very definition of the circular economy, right? Excellent. Thank you. And Professor Kenneth?
If you visit the SMU UOB AEI website, you have a list somewhere, right, Jack? No,
Yeah,
I'm kidding. So I know in Singapore we have a lot of support. There are a lot of grants. At the ministerial level, folks have made a strong commitment towards sustainability, and so the consultants. And the government agencies like Enterprise Singapore, the Ministry of Sustainability, I think they will have, they'll know what the grants are. Yeah, so Enterprise Singapore has, an enterprise financing scheme. So that's something to look out for. But I think underlying Andy's question is, underlying the question is the concern about the pragmatics of adopting more sustainable practices, right? And that's not wrong, right? And I, for one, don't always advocate businesses to depend on grant funding, because I mean it comes with its set of issues as well. There's you question whether you should be spending time trying to drive revenue, or you should be trying to spend time to shape your business in a way that the government agencies want to see it. Is that necessarily the right thing? There might be a delay in when you receive the funds. So, it opens up another can of worms. What we try to encourage firms to do is to think about the pragmatics of adopting these sustainable practices. And I think the way to do that is a few ways, right? I think Jack has, Jack asked a question about the whether margins are affected, right?
Yeah.
So one way of doing that is, looking at whether the practices can help you reduce cost, right? Very straightforward way. Can it reduce cost? So if we change the way we procure energy, right? Can we reduce costs, right? If we think about recycling some of the waste gases, the waste emissions, can that help to reduce some of our other costs, right? And then on the flip side, it's about increasing revenue, right? Very straightforward. And you see that in Kunchira Rot's approach, right? Can we, by adopting some of these practices, does it open up access to new markets? Does it allow us to charge a premium, right? Does it allow us to partner with bigger customers or some other customers, more lucrative customers that wouldn't work with us if we didn't have these practices, right? So I think the third thing, there's a third angle to look at it that tends to be overlooked, particularly for family enterprises. And that's the potential for these practices to increase what we call social-economic wealth, social-emotional wealth. And what social-emotional wealth is that, essentially the intangible value that the family possesses, right? In terms of its legacy, its name, its emphasis on future generations, right? Is there a way that some of these practices can increase social emotional wealth, the legacy of our forefathers, right? Can it help to make us as a family proud, so that when we have the name Mavro, for example, people will associate that with something positive, right? When we hire persons with disabilities, right? We as a family want to be known for that, right? Some of these benefits are there as well, right? They're not immediately tangible and translatable into dollars and cents, but we know there's a benefit there. And then the onus for the business operator is to think about how you might measure and capture some of those benefits. So 3 things in terms of being practical, aside from, if you can find cheap and good government grant, and, if there's a way to de-risk some of your investments, by all means do so. But even if it's not there, and I think businesses have to be sustainable on their own, stand on their own 2 feet, right? Think about how you can reduce cost, increase revenue, and increase social emotional wealth.
Thank you, Prof. Kenneth. So the other thing, thanks, Andy, for the question. So looking at this, the government grants, from my own experience itself, I come from the vendor's perspective. So what happens is that the grants are not just for the businesses to apply, sustainability into as part of their capability development, but then, there's also a pool of us out there that tries to develop new technology. Right, new technology, new application are with sustainability goals. So, for example, what I'm involved in is things like federated learning that preserve data privacy and yet be able to estimate very accurately the battery, the remaining useful life of batteries, so that we can do better optimization when it comes to predictive maintenance. When it comes to things like even scheduling. So, given the mileage of a certain vehicle, how do you schedule your fleet of drivers in order to optimize that coverage? With the best amount of SLA. Right. So in fact, I would say that the government support in this area is very important, and it's not just typically it's not just in one industry, but rather supporting the technology development that can be deployed into multiple industry. So this might be a point where, this might be an area in which family businesses can go out there and look for vendors that are already developing something within that space, and then see if they are able to help to increase the market share or reduce the cost and things like that. Yeah.
There's a little bit just whispered in my ear that Enterprise Singapore, and this is just for Singapore companies, Enterprise Singapore will risk share 70% with financial institutions, but this is until March 2024, right? And for amounts ranging from 3 million to 50 million. March 2024 is like next year, right? It's going to end soon, so do it soon. Don't wait. Yeah. And Jack, you have experience doing stuff like that, so Jack will be your guy to.
Yes, happy to share.
Yes.
Yeah, could I ask Kunjirot again, getting back to the mechanics of things, what major hiccups or hurdles have you come across in your adventure? I can't believe it's quite as smooth as you seem to make it sound.
It's not that smooth. I think the most challenging of what am I doing in the past 2 years, I think the change that we have to do in our facility, because you always produce B2B product, you have a few customer, you sell mass market, but right now you might sell some product with good background story. You try to sell the product with a lot of positive impact. So there's a lot of things that we have to do in our facility or our factory, and also the culture and the proof that we have to deliver to our family. Yep, there's quite a lot of barrier, a lot of challenge that we have been doing in the past 2 years. But I think the most important is my grandmother always taught me that our factory always turn unvaluable items into valuable items. And I always remember that since I was 7 years old, because all the textile factory, all the textile here in Thailand, they always tell our factory are like the rubbish factory, because we always buy the waste from them. Yep. And I think that's the value that my grandmother taught me, and it's the strong value, and we try to be passionate about it. I think that's the reason that we face with the change, we face with the traditional culture. Yeah, have to do a lot of stuff about people. Yeah, let I say conclusion is about people. Because second generation, they are like 72, 73 years old. And the first generation, my grandfather passed away like 2 years ago when he is 102 years old. And now my grandmother, she's still at home, 94 years old. So the gap is quite huge. So we have done a lot of stuff in the past 2 years in the business side and in the family side as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you've got a lot invested in that social emotional wealth
Yeah.
aspect that was just mentioned.
Yeah.
Really amazing.
I
yeah, I'm going to ask you, Ken.
I figured you're going to ask me a question, but I just want to jump in. Just hearing
Please do.
Kunjararat's story, it gives me goosebumps. I don't know if you can see it, but my sideburns, my beard.
I can feel it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
I'm starting to look like Wolverine, with the yeah. But it's and the point I wanted to raise, right, about the challenges. And it's great that you brought it up, because I think far too often we think that it's all about we have this grand idea, right? We want to change the world, and what a wonderful way to do it, right? And everyone just jumps on board. But I think what Kun Wat has said is that it's really about organizational change, right? And all the associated problems that come along with that, right? And that's something that I think many people tend to overlook, that is really about organizational change. And what does that mean when we talk about organizational change? So I'm going to draw on some of the work. If you guys are interested more in organizational change, SMU has a ton of courses. I'm sure Sasin has something as well, right? But maybe we'll do a tie-up, yeah. But one of the things we talk about, and you heard that echoed by Kun Wat, right? It's about culture, right? And what does culture encompass? It encompasses your strategy. So you hear a change in your business model, right? The way we make money, the customers that we relate to, the partners that we partner with, right? You're changing at that, you're making changes at that level. You're changing people, right? People with different skills. And associated with that, particularly in the context of family business, is what do you do with the older workers? The workers who have seen you in your diapers, right? Who've seen you at your most vulnerable. What do you do with them? Do you just fire them? Because that's going to affect social emotional wealth, right? So that's something for you to think about as well, right? If for next gen family members thinking about that change, what do you do with compensation, right? That has to change as well. What do you do with how information is shared, right? I hear Kun Wat talking about QR codes, right? And Dr. Hong is talking about AI, and when in order for us to manage our fleet well, we need data, and in order for us to have data, we need to input that data. And if that data is not passively being constructed, if that data set is not passively being constructed, then it means it has to be actively constructed. And that's a behavioral change issue. How do you get people to input data, to change their habits, to change their routines, right? So all of that is part of that challenge of organizational change that Kun Wat is talking about. And one of the ways, what I liked also, what I got really excited by when he spoke about how he was making that change, is that people are generally resistant to change. We've heard that a lot. It happens to all of us as well, right? But what is the one thing to kind of hold them back, to let them know that even as we're moving forward, we're not cutting ties, we're not severing ties, right? And that's where he goes back to the legacy, something my grandmother has always said, right? And that DNA, that ethos is embedded within the entire family, and that's something which he drew upon, right? Is that value that ties the older generation workers to the new workers and to the change, that helps them see that, look, what we're doing is not so different from what we have always been doing, even as we are doing very different. And that is also a part of that entire paradox mindset that we talk about in our book on circularity principles in family business.
Excellent. I just can't help but wonder, and that's very, very well put. And I can't help but wonder, however, that as a family grows, as it expands, and I take it in the case of Kunwat, there's maybe a dozen or so people, but in other families, as we know, there can be hundreds, and I wonder if that doesn't make it more difficult with the increased diversity and potential for conflict. Either one of you.
Please, you can be first, sir. You answer quite well. I learned a lot from you as well today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You know, I'm so excited talking about this, right? And give me 1 second. You know, I just spoke about this yesterday. You know, spot on. Let me, if you don't mind, you know, I'm going to share my slides. And this was just
Take
from
your time.
a webinar I shared. I was on yesterday with the Family Office Association in Hong Kong. And, you know, we talked about the different challenges that the different generations of family firms face, right? And so, you know, Gen 1 and Gen 2 firms, right? These are some of the typical challenges. In Gen 2 and 3 firms, right? Some of the challenges are, you know, people start to be geographically dispersed. You're finding challenges in having to, I mean, one of the challenges is having to build relationships across the different branches, right? Say in Kunwat's case, is between his children and his nephews and nieces. And at the same time, how do you keep them all aligned and connected? And how do you develop a shared extended family identity? And when you come to Gen 3 and Gen 4 families, right? And this was exactly the problem that Alex has raised, right? It's a lot more diverse now. How do you get everyone involved in that shared mission? How do you get people to know one another, right? So these are very real issues and challenges faced by family-owned firms that Alex has touched on. You know, although it seems like the challenges are changing as the family firms evolve over time. One of the commonalities, and I'm going to fast forward through this slide here, right? One of the commonalities here is, that tension between the I's and the we's, right? Whether you have a Gen 1 or Gen 2 or Gen 3 or Gen 4 or bigger firm, it's always about I and the we. How do we keep them together, right? And so those challenges are always going to be there, right? And it's not just about, I think, and the reason why I emphasize the tension between the I and the we is that when we see families try to bridge or try to address that tension, they often do it by overemphasizing the we, right? Making the we very strong. This is the family, right? If you are not part of this family, you're out. You have something different values, you are out. Now, the problem with that is that you think that by really being very strong and emphasizing the we in a very forceful, sometimes patriarchal, top-down manner, you think that it helps to hold the family together, but sometimes as you get to, you know, Gen 4 and Gen 5 and what have you, people just don't identify with it, and that's where it starts to fracture, right? And that's where the application of circularity principles to the family dynamics and family governance comes into the picture. That's when you start to think about, and Kunwat, you might appreciate this, right? If someone who is not in the business, say he or she is a doctor, for example, right, or a lawyer, still a noble profession, although some might disagree with that, right? But what if he or she is interested in something else? Do we then say that you are not a part of this family, right? How can we see that waste not as waste, but as a valued resource for the family, right? So that same mindset that you have been applying to think about your business, take it and apply it to how we govern, take it and apply it to topics of family governance, right? I think, and that's where you start thinking about building structures and governance mechanisms that allow the I's to flourish, right? To support the I's, the entrepreneurs, the vets, the lawyers, and what have you, or the professors. Yeah. You know, how do you support those inclinations while still keeping them maybe not in the business, but keeping them a part of the family and being able to contribute to the family's social, emotional wealth. I still think like an economist. That's why I keep saying a social economic, wealth. But yes, so that's just some of my comments about the topic.
Sounds like words of wisdom to me. Watt, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, you must be anticipating some of these things down the line too.
Yep. I think the one that we trying to make it done right now is like we try to create good governance in the family. I think that is the most important, and we invest in the ERP as well, like ERP software system for our organization, because we prefer everything to be like transparency, traceability for the family and also in the business. That's the reason that we do it. And I and my brother also like try to empower everyone, even the second generation, to have some value in the company. Let them do something that they might familiar with, and also still keep in touch, update them every quarter, every month. And yep, I think our goal is to make our family business to be like sustainable as long as they can. Even I'm gone away, like go to heaven or something, I still love to make it done, because my grandmother, she always taught me that she very suffer. She works so hard because she prefer her daughter and her nephew, grandchild to become like more comfortable, not suffer like them in the past. Yep, that's the reason they love this business so much, and I want to, and we also have passionate about it. Yep.
Can I ask you a question? So you mentioned that you allow the nieces and nephews, you give them space to do their thing, or other family members give them space to do their thing in the business. Can you tell us more about how those opportunities come about? Is that something that they start on their own, or is there or is it more like, this is what we want to do, can you come and do it? How do you get people involved?
We talking conversation. Yeah, we have to arrange it in the dinner, lunch, at home. We have to ask like, okay, a lot of textile industry has been shut down in the last few years, and so we have to be honest to speak with them that, okay, if we don't do it, we okay, because we don't have the debt, we can shut down, we can close down, but we have some good story, we have some strength. If you want to do it, this is the way that it's possible that we can be sustainable growth again. And if you guys want to do it, what you prefer to do, what roles you want to play, I asked them first. I asked the elder worker, I asked the worker that stayed with my grandmother like 3 years ago. I asked every member in the house. I give them an opportunity to select, to choose what they want to do first. And then we talk about it. Sorry, is it answer your question?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Just tell the true story. Okay.
I'm taking notes because there's a pattern here, right? There's a pattern. If you look at the way that he approached it and the way that he involved people, there's something that we can learn from here. And I'll tell you what's sticking out for me. And I'm happy to hear from Alex and Jack, and even folks from the audience as well. His approach the way how his approach stands out for me is, first of all, he is revealing vulnerability, right? He's not coming to them saying that I am the CEO, I am this, you are this, do this, right? He's saying, look, we are under threat, right? Now, in the organizational change, in terms of best practices for organizational change, one of the ways to get people on board is to communicate a crisis, right? And that's what he did. But it's not alarming, right? Oh, you know, it's like, look, here's a situation. Very matter of factly, here's a situation. What it helps do as well is you're revealing your vulnerability, right? When a powerful person goes to a less powerful person, but still someone you trust, to reveal vulnerability, what this does, and this stuff that we found in our research is that it promotes this sense of psychological safety, right? And it's the basis for building trust, right? So he comes to them and he reveals vulnerability, right? And then he invites them, right? He doesn't say, do this. He says, what would you like to do, right? Here are our needs. What would you like to do? Where do you see yourself in this picture, right? So it's an invitation for you to define your space. That is how you marry the I and the we together, right? So, you know, Kun Wat hasn't read the book yet, but he's been practicing the principles. Or maybe he has read the book, that's why he's practicing the principles. Yeah.
It's good that I'm in the book, but I just I don't have so much knowledge. I just want to do it. So just step by step is issue or is problem. So it's try to solve step by step. Yeah.
Yes.
And it comes from a deep space within you. I'm sorry, Jack, but I just wanted to comment that it really comes from a deep space within Kun Wat, obviously. The values, really strong values that have been embedded, you know, from the generations down. They come through loud and clear without even elaborating on them. Very impressive, Kun Wat.
Thank you to my grandmother. She taught me, but we still small, still long way to go. We invest a lot in the past 2 years. We have a long journey. So still very small right now, long journey. But thanks to my grandmother that she taught me to work so hard. Yeah.
And she taught you humility as well. Excellent. Jack?
Yes, I can't help but keep coming back to the comparison, right, between what was being mentioned in this discussion, as well as what we see out there as the most productive teams. The most productive teams out there, they adopt this approach called Agile. So we talk about Agile, right? It's no longer about, you know, the CEO or the top guy saying that this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do. No, it's not about that. It's about, first of all, identifying the value propositions that, you know, that they want to deliver at the end of the day. So that value is the one that it's number one, the focus, the anchor. And how do they get it done? They actually involve everyone, inclusive, everyone. So by this approach, not only do they create the most productive team, they also create the happiest team. They are happy to work on it. Yeah, it's just a parallel, exactly the same parallel.
Yeah. And that's what we talk about in the book as well. No, it's true.
I think you're still writing that book, you know?
Yeah, I'm taking these ideas and, you know, putting, but so something we do talk about is this idea of, I mean, what are the benefits of circularity, right? It's not just about transforming waste into value resources, but it's about being inclusive at the end of the day, right? And when we apply it to families, when we apply it to family governance, it's about being inclusive of the diversity within the family, right? And what we know, coming back, you know, to Jack's point about being agile, right, and being adaptive, what we know and what we've seen in the most recent past during the pandemic is that the best way to adapt to unpredictability and uncertainty is not to have the best planners, right? We can never plan. We could never have planned for anything, right? But it's really to have what population ecologists refer to as a requisite variety, right, of options. Okay, so what that means in the family business context, well, the way that they look at it is that, you know, for a species to survive, right, it's not one dominant trait. It's not about one particularly dominant trait, right? What they need is to have that variety of traits within the species so that when the environment changes, you can have that one trait that becomes dominant because it's the most adaptive to the environment, right? And if you take that principle and apply it to family business, it's kind of the same idea that, you know, you want to have a diversity, that diversity within the family is a strength, right? So how do we, rather than homogenize everything within the family, right? Overemphasize the we. How do we celebrate the I's, allow the I's to flourish, and create the mechanisms, the governance mechanisms, so that the I's can flourish, right? Because that will contribute to the we's. Because when times change, that's when the family will be able to tap on the diversity of I's, the diversity of competencies and skills amongst the I's, to sustain itself over the generations.
Wow. Wow. What can I add to that? I can't add anything. That's sort of really wraps it up in terms of the generational approach to things. I don't know. Do you have any more questions, Jack, that we can answer within the next few minutes? And otherwise, we'll ask. Oh, I'm getting a message here. The audience might have. Okay, no, we don't have any more questions. So,
Yeah.
do you have any more questions, Jack? If not, we can ask them each to make a summary statement,
Sure.
the sort of takeaway they would like the audience to have.
Yeah, let's dedicate the remaining time to the takeaways. That's very important. Yeah.
Okay. So, which one would like to go first and give your words of wisdom for the audience to take away for their own family businesses? Not me, you mean Gerardo.
Oh, okay. But
Let's take a vote. You know, audience participation. Who wants Alex to go first? Raise your hands.
Okay.
What? There you go.
Oh, Jack.
Oh, yeah, sure. I can go first because I love to listen to Professor Kenneth because I think I get like lecturing today and learn a lot. That okay, what I'm doing is from the book as well. I will buy one. Your book, please let me know what's the name of the book.
Yeah, it's a free download, but if you want to buy it, I'm willing to accept money.
Okay, sure, sir, sure.
And what the link is in the chat.
And
okay.
I'll send you my bank account as well.
Okay, thank you, sir. For me, what I want to share today, I think the topic is about sustainability, make impact on core business, right? So, okay, SC Grant has some strong value in turning like unvaluable items into valuable items, but other might not be suitable to do the same as the SC Grant. So you have to revise your core value, revise your strength, and then adapt like sustainability concept into your business. Yeah, that's what I'm sharing today.
Thank you, Gunwat. Professor Kenneth.
Final points. Oh, I mean, I'm lost for words, you know, and the reason why I'm lost for words is because so much of my enthusiasm and the energy for this topic really comes from the families themselves. You know, I've seen studies that say, oh, families are not doing too much. They say they want to do this. I'm like, you know, screw that. This is recorded, right? I mean, screw those findings. Who cares? What's important is this. We find the families who are doing good and we get them together. We form that community and we find other families, right? Other next-gen members who want to go down that path as well. And we build that community to support them. That's what's important. None of those surveys that tell you how many percentage of it, I don't think that's important. Yeah. So for me, it's really about, you know, I'm so excited hearing about entrepreneurs like Kunwat. You know, my takeaway is find that community. At BFI, we are trying to build that community. So link up with us. I'm going to add my stuff, you know, LinkedIn profile. And, you know, if you go on LinkedIn, you can find Business Families Institute at SMU as well. And, you know, we are doing some courses on family entrepreneurship. And the whole idea behind that is we want to build that community through education, right? Building community through education. That's what we want to do. Let's form that community and let's do good together. And along the way, there might be alcohol as well. But, you know, as I know in Sir King's office, there's alcohol, but in mine, the only alcohol I have are alcohol wipes. So yeah. But yeah, let's build that community together, you know, and there are many more Kunwats around there. There are many more entrepreneurs that need that support, and we're willing to work with you to go on that journey of creating sustainable impact.
Yes, we certainly see that here, and I'm sure it's more widespread than just Thailand. That's great.
Yeah.
And I want to thank both of you for your time and your openness. It's really great. This will be recorded. I'm sure a lot more people will be looking forward to rewatching it, and new people to watch it as well. So I'd like to thank the whole crew behind the scenes here, and also our panelists, Professor Kenneth Goh and Kun Wat, and Dr. Jack Hong, who I'm meeting for the very first time. Very kind, very good to meet you. And we look forward to another session in the future of a different type. Okay. We also, oh, Jennifer, do you want to take over?
Yes, so sorry. Go ahead, Alex. It's okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, and thank you, panelists. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dr. Jack. Thank you, Professor Kenneth and Mr. Giraro. Thank you so much for this interactive and insightful sharing. And yes, I also have a look at the book. It's really interesting. So, and thank you to everyone for actually taking time to join us for today's session. And in order to help us to better improve our offerings, right, we hope that you can provide us with your feedback, via this online feedback form that you are seeing. And also on behalf of Sasin SEC as well as UOB SMU Asian Enterprise Institute, we hope that you have enjoyed the whole entire webinar series on the sustainability for Asian family businesses. And we also look forward to seeing you at our future events. All right. So if there's if you have any questions, please also feel free to drop us an email at the email address that you can see. All right. So thank you, everyone. That's all for today, and take care and have a good weekend ahead. All right, take care. Thanks. Bye bye.
Thank you. Khop khun krap.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Great show, guys.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks.